Call the James City County Wetlands Board to order. The responsibility of this board is to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to preserve the wetlands and to accommodate economic activities so as to prevent that spoliation. Can we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Rodley?
Here.
Mr. Waltrip?
Here.
Mr. Gussman?
Here.
Mr. Hughes?
Here.
Mr. Apperson?
Here.
Did you all have a chance to look at the minutes? Any additions, corrections, deletions? Okay. Can we have a vote to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Supposed to be roll call according to what's written down here.
Mr. Rodley?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. Gussman?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
We have a public hearing. Will you be doing that, Mr. Wilson?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, the public hearing that was scheduled for tonight was wrongly public noticed, and we have to redo the public notice. It will be heard at the August board meeting. There is no presentation tonight.
This doesn't require any action on our part.
No, sir, it does not.
Okay. Have board consideration, W1717.
Afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, James City County, here to present a request for surety release for case W17-17, VMRC 17-0074. This case was brought to the board at the March 8th, 2017 meeting. And the applicant's request was to construct a 5 by 240 foot non-commercial open pile pier through an existing mature bald cypress swamp. The conditions under such a meeting were that a pre-construction meeting were to be held, that a meeting at 1 year post-construction to determine if any permanent tidal wetland impacts had occurred, and that 6 trees were allowed to be removed. The post-construction meeting has occurred, and staff finds that there is no detriment to the wetlands at this time. Vicinity map 7596 Uncle's Neck, within the Uncle's Neck subdivision. Above is an aerial map of the parcel, and the above is a photo taken before construction began. The flags, the pink flags on the trees indicate trees to be taken down. The above photos show the condition of the wetlands at 1 year post-construction. Again, staff finds that there's no further harm to the wetlands, and that the wetlands appear to be in good condition. Staff does recommend that surety is released, and with no purchase of tidal wetland credits. This time, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and the board may wish to make a vote on releasing the surety.
Any questions?
Trevor, do you know that was the construction method to walk out on the existing structure as they built it, or did they have mats? Do you know?
I believe they had mats.
No, they walked out on the existing structure. No matting was used.
Thank you.
Other questions? Thank you, sir. Board consideration, discussion? A motion?
Chairman, I make a motion to accept staff recommendation for release of the surety for Wetlands Board Case W-1717 at 7596 Uncle's Neck.
Have a motion. Can we have a vote, please?
Mr. Rodley?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. Gussman?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Do you have any matters of special privilege? I think not. Have a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. We have moved. There we go, sir.
Okay. I'd like to call to order the June 13th meeting of the James City County Chesapeake Bay Board. The responsibility of this board is to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to protect against and minimize pollution and deposition of sediment in wetlands, streams, and lakes in James City County, which are tributaries of the Chesapeake Bay. And I might comment that, boy, with all this rain lately, we definitely need this ordinance. Ms. Parman, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Roadley?
Here.
Mr. Waltrip?
Here.
Mr. Gussman?
Here.
Mr. Hughes?
Here.
Mr. Apperson?
Here.
First order of business are the minutes from the May 9th board meeting. Are there any changes, additions, deletions to the minutes? Okay, I see we're voting on minutes now. Will somebody make a motion to accept the minutes?
I'll make a motion, sir.
Okay, can we have a roll call, Ms. Parman?
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. Gussman?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
On to public hearings. Our first case tonight is CBE-18-091, 2148 Benomi Drive. Mr. Wilson, will you please present the case?
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. The applicants for this case have requested a deferral until the August meeting. They could not attend tonight. Staff does concur with that request.
Okay, let's see. Do I have to open the public hearing, or we can just vote to defer?
It's already been public notice, so please open the public hearing, allow anybody to speak, and then keep the hearing open.
But we don't have to open it, right? We can just defer it.
Since it was noticed, I recommend opening it and just, as Mr. Wilson said, keeping it open.
Okay. All right, at this time, I'll open the public hearing for CBE-18-091. Would anyone like to speak on this issue? Okay, no one is interested in speaking. We'll leave the public hearing open. The applicant has requested that we defer the case to next month because they were not able to attend. Does anyone have any problems with that? Can we have a motion to defer the public hearing?
Yes, sir. I'll make a motion to defer the public hearing for Chesapeake Bay Board case CBE 18091 at 2148 Benomi Drive.
Okay, so we have a motion to defer, and I assume that's till next month. Do we need to specify?
It will actually be the August meeting. There is no July meeting.
Oh, okay, till our next meeting. then.
Yes, just defer
Okay.
to the next meeting.
Okay, any discussion on the motion? Ms. Parman, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. Gussman?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Okay. Next case is CBE-18-092, 4069 South Riverside Drive.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I'm Mike Wilson, Senior Watershed Planner, here to present case CBE 18-092 of 4069 South Riverside Drive. Mr. Vladimir Arana has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception for encroachments into the RPA for the installation of a hot tub on property located at 4069 South Riverside Drive within the Chickahominy Haven subdivision. Property is further identified as James City County Tax Map Parcel 19105000015. The parcel was platted in 1961, which is prior to the adoption of the original Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance. Earlier this year, Mr. Arana was cited for a violation that he appealed to this board. As part of that settlement, Mr. Arana was required to restore the RPA with shrubs and other vegetation, no turf grass, and allowed to have a 10-foot by 20-foot area for playground equipment for his children. Mr. Arana is proposing to reduce that playground area to a 10-foot by 10-foot area and install a hot tub in the other 10-foot by 10-foot area. The total additional impervious cover increase is 64 square feet within the seaward 50-foot RPA. Staff does not recommend any further mitigation due to the restoration of the RPA that Mr. Arana has previously undertaken. Staff does note that 2 exception requests within 6 months of each other is highly unusual, and the staff has no guidance for the board on whether or not these should be considered serial requests. However, the state would consider and does have guidance on serial requests such as this. Staff's evaluated the application and the exception request for the installation of the hot tub and finds that the application does meet the requirements set out in the ordinance, and the application should be heard by the board because the hot tub is considered an accessory structure. Staff's reviewed the application exception request and determined that the impacts associated with this proposal to be minor in nature. Language in the Department of Environmental Quality Guidelines does state that the department discourages serial exceptions because the criteria for granting exceptions are based on the minimum necessary to provide the use of the property, not for convenience or desire for a particular level of development. Therefore, staff does not recommend approval of this exception request due to the applicant's appearance before this board in regards to CBV 18-008 and CBE 18-063. Should the board grant the exception, the staff recommends the following conditions: that the applicant obtain any other necessary federal, state, local permits as required, that the exception request approval become null and void if construction is not begun by June 13, 2019, and that written requests for extensions to the exception shall be submitted to the Stormwater Resource Protection Division no later than 6 months prior to that expiration date. Again, the applicant request is to install a hot tub. Subject parcels at 4069 South Riverside Drive within the Chickahominy Haven subdivision, immediately adjacent to the Chickahominy River. Aerial photograph. This was taken in 2017. Doesn't show the current development of the property. Topography of the site is relatively flat until you reach the river, and then it drops down. Floodplain as it affects this property. The dark blue is 100-year floodplain, and the green is, I believe, 500-year floodplain. Resource protection area as it affects this property envelopes the entire structure, actually goes into the front yard on the property. From the application, the site plan, this was the original 10-foot by 20-foot area that was set aside for a playground. The rest of this area was restored in plants and mulch. He was allowed to keep patio here from the violation and a pathway and steps down to the existing pier on the river. Further, he was allowed to keep the retaining wall that is shown here. Some photographs of the site. This would be the area in question, this area right here, with the playground equipment being in this area. This would be part of the patio that was allowed to remain up by the house. And that patio looking the other direction. And this is that patio and the walkway, and then the playground area against this fence on the far side of the picture. Again, staff recommends denial of the permit exception request, but should the board choose to approve, we would offer these conditions: that any other necessary local, state, federal permits, and that it's void if not started by June 13, 2019, and that an extension request be submitted to our office no later than 6 weeks prior to that expiration date. Staff would be happy to answer any questions the board may have regarding this application.
Is the restoration complete from the last permit? Have you signed off on it?
We did an inspection. He has done everything that staff and this board has asked to do in terms of restoration. We have not fully released that surety. We want to give it 1 year grow in to release the remainder of that surety. We'll go back out either October, November of this year or springtime next year to do a final release on that portion.
Any other questions for the staff?
I have one. The picture that you have up now shows the area where the hot tub's going to be up next to the fence.
Correct. It's up
And
here.
you've got that pad that I guess comes off the house. It's for a
This
patio.
this patio here,
Yes.
yes,
And the brown is mulch.
correct.
How is he going to get from the patio to the hot tub?
I would let the applicant address that question.
So there's nothing in the plans that show any sort of pathway, stone
No, sir,
pathway?
there are no stepping stones or concrete path proposed over there.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Question, what grass is this planted here?
They were bunch grasses. I don't know the specific species. Maybe Mr. Arana can remember. Don't know.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to address the board? Please come forward, state your name for the record.
You guys, my name is Vladimir right now, and I'm the owner of 46. Thank you so much that I want to come see you again. The question was, I don't need anything really to access. I can walk over the mulch, or worst case, maybe I can throw some pads where I can step on it. But I don't want to disturb anything else. That's what I just decided from the playground area, which was my part for like a recreation. Just cut it on half, and half for the play area and half for the hot tub. That way I don't disturb anything else. And I went with Sonny, and everything was Sonny, and as long as you guys approve it, they okay with that.
Any questions for the applicant?
What about the playground equipment? This has been finished for a while. When did you decide that you weren't going to put playground equipment in there?
Right before I even finished before we get inspected. So still the way it is, I was gonna do sand play in there, but I haven't done anything. I'm waiting to see if I would do. I would just do sand play on half, and the other half would be the playground, the hot tub.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay, thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak on this issue? At this time, I'll close the public hearing. Discussion from the board.
Mr. Chairman, in looking at the scope of the project, I can appreciate staff's position, but the mulching of this area within the RPA is somewhat of an improvement over the grass condition that exists in many of these areas. So I'm inclined to lean in favor of approving this request.
I feel the same way. I mean, if in the original plan he had come to us with the hot tub, you know, I think I would have approved it without any problems. And he carried out, you know, he did comply with the restoration. I think it looks pretty good. And I also do appreciate citizens may feel that we're being awfully picky about this, but, you know, these are regulations and we're required. We are making progress. It's not put in before the permit. So I think I'd be in favor of, you know, granting an exception. Any other comments?
Looks to me like, you know, the area is already, essentially, it doesn't make any difference what you
Yeah.
But I do have a problem with, not that I'm planning on voting against this, voting against, I'm not comfortable at all, just for me personally. I can see the point here.
Mr. Apperson, could you move your mic so that, because I can't hear you? Thank you.
The thing is so sensitive, if you put your hands down on the counter, And I find it to be worrisome. Not that I don't want you to hear me. I was saying that I have a problem with ever voting against staff's recommendations, but this looks so clear-cut that I do plan on voting for this, and simply because the land, the site's already occupied by a non-productive area to begin with. It's not hurting anything to put the hot tub there, in my way of thinking with this. I do applaud the fact that I like seeing the mulch much more than I do grass, especially close to the water. It's the thing to have there, in my opinion, and that's all I have to say about it. That's it.
Okay, anybody else? Any other comments? Can we have, somebody want to make a motion then?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception for Chesapeake Bay Board case CBE-18-092 at 4069 South Riverside Drive.
Okay, any comments on that? Everyone understand the resolution? The motion? Ms. Parman, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. Gussman?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Mr. Rodley?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries, and we've granted the exception. Okay, so you can put in the hot tub. But you're going to have to let the kids use the hot tub since you're taking it away from their playground area. Okay. The next case is CBE-18-093. Mr. Long, will you make the staff presentation, please?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, James City County, here to present CBE-18-093, 123 Jordan's Journey. Whitford and Judith Strickland have applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a retaining wall, access path, and coir log bank stabilization on property located at 123 Jordan's Journey within the First Colony subdivision and the James River watershed. Parcel was platted in 1964 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Total impervious cover within the RPA is 770 square feet within the landward 50-foot RPA. To date, the applicant has proposed a mitigation plan of 3 eastern redbuds, at least 20 assorted shrubs, and 1,271 square feet of native ground cover. Required mitigation for this amount of impact would be 2 planting units. Therefore, proposed mitigation exceeds county requirements. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a retaining wall, access path, and coir log bank stabilization, and finds that the application meets the conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14, and that the applicant should be heard by the board because the proposed additions are considered accessory in nature. The Chesapeake Bay Board should fully consider Chesapeake Bay exception CBE-18-093 as outlined and presented above, and review the request for exception along with the WQIA. Staff has reviewed the application and exception request and has determined impacts to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval of this exception request with the following conditions incorporated. Applicant obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits required for the project, that the applicant submit a mitigation plan with a $1,000 surety to guarantee the plantings, and that this exception request approval will become null and void if construction has not begun by June 13th, 2019, with written request for extension no later than 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. Divert your attention to the screen. Again, the applicant request is to construct a retaining wall with access path and installation of coir logs within the landward 50-foot RPA. Vicinity is 123 Jordan's Journey within the First Colony subdivision. Above is an aerial photograph of the parcel and its proximity to the James River watershed. Topography on the site is flat and gradually slopes down towards the water as you approach the backyard. As you can see, the resource protection area encompasses the majority of the house and the associated backyard. Above is the site plan detailing the proposed improvements. Above are the coir log stabilization for the purpose of stabilizing the bank where erosion is occurring, a proposed access path down to the water, and a proposed gravel walkway adjacent to the coir logs. Retaining wall is proposed right above the walkway and the 100-foot RPA. Mitigation plan is listed above. Again, mitigation proposed is 3 eastern redbuds, at least 20 assorted shrubs, and 1,271 square feet of native ground cover. Above pictures indicate the erosion that is occurring where the retaining wall and coir log stabilization are proposed. This image shows the proposed access pathway and staircase. Same picture leading back towards the house. A picture taken from the edge of the wetlands facing towards the house. Again, staff does recommend approval given the following conditions: that all other necessary local, state, and federal permits required are obtained, that a $1,000 surety made payable to the James City County Treasurer is submitted, and that this request become null and void if not started by June 13, 2019, with extension requests no later than 6 weeks prior to the expiration. I'd be happy to answer any questions the board may have at this time.
What's the access path made of? How's that constructed? How will that be constructed?
I will defer that question to the applicant. I believe he will be able to better answer the question.
Any other questions for staff? All right. At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to address the board? Please state your name for the record.
I'm Whitford Strickland, and I live at 123 Jordan's Journey, Williamsburg, Virginia.
I had a question.
Yes.
How will the access path be constructed? Will that be permeable or?
It's basically it would have either wood or stone riser and a gravel path. Would just be loose gravel, 3 inches of loose gravel in a silt erosion fabric bed. Same thing you would put under a deck. Basically, it would be washed gravel, so it would take the water and allow it to run off, or trap the water in behind the treads and dissipate.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Would anyone else like to speak on this issue? At this time, I'll close the public hearing. Any discussion from the board?
Chairman, there is some erosion occurring. That's sometimes hard to control that. Maybe the coir logs will help address that.
I think it's a vast improvement over what's there now.
Okay, I do too. It's minimal impacts. Would someone like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion to approve. All path and shoreline stabilization.
Okay, so we have a motion to adopt the resolution that grant the exception for CBE-18-093. Ms. Parman, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rodley?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. Gussman?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries. The exception is granted. Thank you for coming out. Next case is CBE-18-088, 1 Ensign Spence. Mr. Long?
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long here to present CBE-18-088, 1 Ensign Spence. Mr. Matthew Roth has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. J. Napoleon for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a patio and retaining wall located at 1 Ensign Spence within the Kings Mill subdivision and the College Creek watershed. Parcel was platted in 1974 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Current conditions of the RPA, to give some backstory on the lot, have a raised garden with an impervious path dividing the garden into 4 sections. The applicant is proposing to remove the garden and the associated impervious cover to partially compensate for the installation of the patio and retaining wall. The net increase in impervious cover is 63 square feet within the RPA. Further, the applicant is proposing some work outside the RPA and is proposing to capture the stormwater runoff from the existing home and propose improvements in a rain garden that has been designed to the Virginia Best Management Practices Clearinghouse standards for rain garden infiltration practices. In addition to the stormwater practices being proposed, the applicant is also proposing to use the Turf Love program, help reduce excessive nutrient application, and more than doubles the required planting mitigation to include 2 canopy trees, 4 understory trees, and 19 shrubs. Staff has evaluated the application and exception requests for the construction of a patio and retaining wall and finds that the application meets conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14, and that the application should be heard by the board because the proposed items are considered accessory in nature. Again, the mitigation plan that has been submitted exceeds county requirements. Chesapeake Bay Board should fully consider Chesapeake Bay exception CBE-18-088 as outlined and presented above and reviewed their request for exception along with the WQIA. Staff has reviewed the application and determined impacts associated with the proposal to be minor. Staff recommends approval of this exception request with the following conditions incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal and local state permits as required for the project. That a surety of $3,000 will be required in a form acceptable to the county attorney's office to guarantee the mitigation, including plantings, Turf Love program registration, and rain garden installation. The rain garden feature must follow the standards and specifications found in the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality Stormwater Specification Number 9 Bioretention Current Version, and that this exception request approval become null and void if construction has not begun by June 13th, 2019 with written requests for an extension accepted no later than 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. Again, the applicant request is to construct a patio and retaining wall within the RPA, located at 1 Ensign Spence within the Kings Mill subdivision and the College Creek watershed. Aerial photograph indicates the associated and proposed location of the retaining wall and patio. Above you can see the current garden and its impervious cover splitting into 4 sections. Contours indicate backyard mostly flat until the wood line is reached, which it begins to drop off. RPA associated with the lot encapsulates the majority of the northern section. The current site plan shows the 50-foot and 100-foot RPA as has been delineated with the fenced garden to be removed and also the cement patio, which will also be removed. New proposals indicate bioretention and the associated retaining wall, which go through the current garden, and the patio proposed partially within the 100-foot RPA. Mitigation, again, incorporates the bioretention area and the plantings indicated in green around the retaining wall. Stakes in green indicate the proposed area for the patio. And stakes in orange indicate the retaining wall. This is the current condition of the garden, site where the bioretention area will be filled. Again, staff does recommend approval of this proposal, given that all other necessary local, state, and federal permits are required, that a $3,000 surety is made acceptable to the county attorney's office, that the bioretention feature will follow the standards and specifications found in the Virginia DEQ Stormwater Specification Number 9 Bioretention Current Version, and that this request become null and void if not started by June 13th, 2019, with written requests for an extension no later than 6 weeks prior to the expiration. I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
I didn't quite follow. Is that whole garden area on a pad? The pad is the whole garden area?
Yes, yes, sir. The entire garden area is currently on pad to be removed, showing a net decrease in impervious and associated mitigation.
Okay, all right. I wanted to be clear on that. Any other questions for the staff about this one? Okay, thank you, Thank you, Trevor. At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to speak?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. I'm Matt Roth, president of Roth Environmental, 700 Prescott Circle, Newport News. I'm here this evening representing Mr. Jay Napoleon, who has made the request for the exemption to encroach into the RPA buffer, as shown on the site plan that you're seeing. The lot was platted back in 1974. It's roughly a 0.8 acre lot. The house was built in the early 2000s. As you could see on the photographs that Mr. Long has shown, the rear portion of the yard slopes to the north and to the northwest, and that comes down to the perennial stream, which is located in this area here. Currently, none of the stormwater on the lot is directed to a BMP, so everything flows directly into the perennial stream. The front yard actually flows back toward Ensign Spence, and there's a drop inlet at the very end of Ensign Spence, which becomes the headwater of the perennial stream. For our proposed design, the applicant's proposing to install the raised patio and a swimming pool as depicted on the site plans. We are showing the swimming pool as part of this as to show a complete plan. We didn't want to come in and try to piecemeal a patio in and then come back several months or so later and then also show the swimming pool. So I hope that's not overly confusing. The pool and the pool deck is all outside the Chesapeake Bay buffer, but the patio is within it. The RPA buffer, as Trevor stated, our encroachment will be the patio, the retaining wall, and a bioretention area. Outside the RPA buffer, we have the proposed swimming pool, the pool deck, and the pump house. So the patio is what we're looking at as an extension of a covered porch in this area here. The covered porch has a relatively low ceiling on it. Mr. Napoleon cannot keep his grill under there, so this is why he has the concrete pad in this area here that will be removed. The area has been shifted, the patio has been shifted to the south as much as possible. There was an original submission on this project that was to be heard, I believe it was last month, and we deferred that one to come back and redesign. On that plan, the patio is coming directly off the rear and basically squared off here. That had an additional 25 to 30 feet encroachment to this corner here where the patio would have been. But In moving the patio to the south, approximately 25 to 30 feet, the entire project was able to be shifted farther outside the buffer as possible, and that includes the retaining wall. The retaining wall has been designed so that it will create an upper and lower area in the backyard. The upper area, which is in here, will be used to have the runoff drop into that area, and then we're going to have a little swale in here that comes to a drop inlet right here that will go into the B&P. Everything from the pool deck and this rear portion of the house will also flow that direction and end up in the B&P. So we're going to catch quite a bit of runoff there. The lower portion of the patio will be, the lower portion of the yard on the downslope side of the retaining wall will be mulched and vegetated. What we have, as part of the construction process, the edge of the site, the edge of the disturbance area, we will install silt fence, so there will be a physical barrier to any downslope areas that will also prevent sediments from going down the hill and the runoff. The existing improvements that will be removed, as Mr. Long stated, is we're going to remove the garden that's in this area. And just a little clarification on the impervious in the garden. We counted the stone and the retaining wall that's around the garden, but not the 8x8 planters that were in the garden. Kind of felt that we might be double dipping there, since that actually did help the plants grow in its earth. So that was not included as part of our impervious calculation. So we're going to remove the impervious associated with the garden and the patio, and that accounts for 556 square feet of impervious area in the buffer that exists today. That will be removed, and the new impervious that's proposed for the buffer is 619 square feet, for a difference of an increase of only 63 square feet for this project. The site plan does address all non-point source pollutants outlined in the Chesapeake Bay Act. As usual, when I walk through one of these for you guys, I like to talk about the alternatives that we had considered. Originally, like I stated, we had a patio that was coming directly off the covered porch. It encroached much farther into the buffer, and then it also pushed the retaining wall out farther down the slope, which would account for a great much more clearing of trees along that slope. We still wanted to be able to catch that water, so the retaining wall was still necessary. So in sliding it to the south, we were actually able to pull everything back landward as much as possible. The other thing we considered was, placement of the patio, and from a functionality standpoint. From a functional standpoint, we needed it to stay tied into the kitchen and family room and the covered patio. We looked at actually putting it potentially over here where the garage is, but there's really no access to it, and it becomes kind of an unfunctional feature. We also, as part of our alternatives analysis, we were able to shrink the patio from its original design. The original design, I believe it was a couple hundred feet larger than it is, a couple hundred square feet larger than it is now. So for our mitigation plan, as we stated, there's several different portions of that. One is the vegetative portion. 1 unit is required for the 63 square feet of impervious area. We are offering 3 units. Again, that's 2 canopy species, 4 understory, and 19 shrubs, as shown on the mitigation plan that you see on the screen. 80% of the mitigation species will be natives. This allows the applicant to incorporate some ornamental species in there if he wishes. Our landscape design was planned to plant the mitigation in areas where it would come in contact with water, with storm water. So we will have some of our mitigations planted in the bioretention area. We'll also have a mulch bed up in this western area that will receive water that comes off the pool deck. We'll also be incorporating 1,425 square feet of mulch into the plan, and that's shown here. And then it will also be on the downslope side of the retaining wall. This area in here will be grass, and the reason we're doing that is we anticipate that the runoff from this area would wash mulch into that drop inlet. So we're going to try to keep that as a grass area so that it'll stabilize it at least, and then it'll get to this drop inlet and then go into the bioretention area. And finally, since there is such a large percentage of this property that is in the RPA buffer, and especially that it is yard area, we're going to enroll in the Turf Love program. And that basically the applicant will work with the Virginia Cooperative Extension Service, and they'll teach them how to apply the correct amount of fertilizers and reduce their pesticides in the lawn areas. So I hope that helps you understand our thought process for the design on the lot. We've worked very hard with the applicant, their engineer, and county staff to greatly improve our plan. We feel that our plan greatly exceeds the requirements of the Chesapeake Bay Act, and we're asking for your approval of the plan with staff recommendations. And I'll answer any questions you have, or you can ask me during your discussion.
Well, I have to commend you. You're getting very good at reading my mind before and heading off my objections before I make them. And it does sound like you really made an effort to minimize the impacts. I like the plan a lot, and I'm glad to see a plan like this come in. Because what you described, I would have raised those objections to it. So
If they could all be like
this,
this,
it looks pretty good.
it would be easier sometimes.
Your comments, questions from the board?
Just a quick question. In your outfall, do you have a level spreader at the end of the outfall, or is it just rock?
It'll just be riprap in this area here. There will be a level spreader in this area, kind of an emergency spillway. Just with the amount of impervious that we have and the water that could potentially go there, we felt that was necessary.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Would anyone else like to speak on this issue? Please state your name for the record.
Jay Napoleon. I'm the property owner here, my wife and I. I have a prepared statement, and then I'll see any questions you have. I've been working with the county staff and my consultants and engineers to reduce and minimize the impervious encroachment into the RPA buffer associated with the project. We have dramatically scaled the impervious area back in the buffer and are providing necessary mitigation for the project. Probably Mike may or may not remember, it was probably 3 years ago, I invited him out to the house to even talk about the start of this project. Sometime when we talked on the phone and he came out, it started to snow quite heavily. So he walked around my yard in a snowstorm, and I told him what we'd like to do. At that time, it was a bigger project with more encroachment, and with the help of Matt Roth and Land Tech, we've changed it dramatically for the better, I think. One of the things Mike told me, I know the pool has raised some eyebrows. That may or may not happen. That's for budgetary reasons, for other reasons. But when I talked to Mike, he said, anything you might do, I want you to present to the board. We don't want to come back and have to revisit this. So that's why we kind of did a plan that would encompass anything we might do in the future as well. That's certainly not happening now, and it may not happen at all. I mean, we hope it does, but it may not. But that's the reason that all that's there on the plan proposal. Any questions?
Questions? The plan is obviously very well thought out. It looks like a good plan.
Well, I owe a lot of that to Matt Roth and Land Tech, so I want to thank them.
Okay, thank you. Would anyone else like to speak on this issue? This time I'll close the public hearing. Discussion from the board.
I agree with you. It's a good plan, and they've made adjustments to it to decrease the impact.
I think it's the first time I can recall a vegetable garden be destroyed for a bio-retention pond, but things are changing,
That's right. But a vegetable garden on surrounded by a concrete pad. Okay. Would someone like to make a motion?
Yes, sir. I'll make a motion to adopt a resolution to grant the exception to Chesapeake Bay Board case CBE 1808881, number 1, instance Spence.
Okay, we have a motion to adopt a resolution to grant the exception. Ms. Parman, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rodley?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip? Yes. Mr. Gussman?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Okay, exception is granted. Thank you for coming out, and thank you for a well-thought-out plan. Next case, CBE-18-100, 4131 Centerville Road. Mr. Wilson.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Again, Mike Wilson, Senior Watershed Planner, here to present case CBE-18-100, 4131 Centerville Road. Mr. Joe Franklin has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of the Green Springs Mobile Home Park for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a new principal structure on property located at 4131 Centerville Road. Property is further identified as James City County Tax Map number 36401000001. Parcel was platted in 1955 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Ordinance. The total impervious cover within the RPA for this encroachment would be 1,400 square feet, of which 400 square feet is within the seaward 50-foot RPA. The lot in question has been used historically for a mobile home site. That use was discontinued in 1986. Owners are requesting to use the site again for a mobile home site because the other programmed site has had encroachments into it from the two adjacent mobile homes. I would defer any questions on that to Mr. Joe Franklin, who can better explain what has happened over time. The major open space outside of the RPA cannot be used for the mobile home placement because it is used for the community as their recreation area. Applicant has verbally committed to planting the required mitigation at the rear of the lot, but a proposed mitigation plan has not been submitted. The required mitigation for this amount of impact would be 3 mitigation units. Staff evaluated the application and this request for the new structure and finds that the application does meet the requirements as outlined in the ordinance, and the application should be heard before the board because the proposed construction encroaches into the 50-foot seaward RPA. Staff has also determined that the impacts associated with this proposal to be major for the proposed development. Staff does recommend approval of the exception request with the following conditions incorporated into that approval. That the applicant obtain any other necessary federal, state, local permits as required for the project. That the applicant submit a mitigation plan with the 3 planting units along with a $1,500 surety to guarantee the plantings. That the exception request shall become null and void if construction has not begun by June 13th, 2019, and that written request for extension shall be submitted to our office no later than 6 weeks prior to that application expiration date. I direct you to your monitors. The applicant request is to construct a new principal structure out here at 4131 Centerville Road, otherwise known as the Green Springs Mobile Home Park. Historic aerial photograph from 1986 does show everything, this mobile home site here being in use, plus several others that are in use back in 1986. 2017 aerial photograph shows all of these mobile homes gone. The mobile home in question, the lot I believe is up here. Mr. Franklin can correct me if I'm wrong during the public hearing. These 2 units have encroached upon the available space for that unit where it was programmed to be. Mr. Franklin did not want to approach either of those unit owners to move their mobile homes in order to get the last unit that he's allowed up in here, and instead has decided to ask for an exception request down here to reuse what had historically been used as a mobile home site. Topography of the site, generally slopes from east to west with 2 ravines bordering either side of the triangular shaped piece. And then RPA as it affects the properties. And from the site plan application, the unit in question is here. The two units we looked at in the aerial photograph, one was here, the other was here. I would want to make it clear to the board, or as clear as I can make it. These property lines that we are looking at in the mobile home park are not physically platted at the courthouse. They are pieces of property that the mobile home park does lease to each mobile home property. So while they're lines on this map and they would rent this piece of property, what has happened over time, the unit that's here has encroached into this program space here, and the unit that's here has also encroached. It is not a zoning violation per se, because there's no actual property line that they've crossed or any setback lines. So Mr. Franklin has asked to put the last mobile home that they are allowed by special use permit to have out here in this location up here. Some photographs of the site. The site has undergone successional forest growth over those intervening 30 some odd years. Some loblolly and sweet gum. Not sure what the undergrowth is, but this is where the location where the trailer unit would, mobile home unit would be proposed. This is existing concrete pad that they would be reusing. This is from when the site was used by as a mobile home site. The home, I believe, and Mr. Franklin can correct me if I'm misstating this again. This concrete pad would be part of the driveway, and the mobile home is actually adjacent to it. So they're reusing the impervious that's there and not increasing for parking. The only increase is for the actual unit itself. Permit conditions, staff again does recommend approval with these conditions, that any other necessary local, federal, state permits are required, that a $1,500 surety be in place to guarantee the mitigation, that it's null and void if the exception request is not, or the project is not started by June 13, 2019, and then any extension request be submitted to our office no later than 6 weeks prior to that expiration date. I would be happy to answer any questions the board may have regarding this application.
I need clarification on something, but can I ask Ms. Parman to come up? Put you on the spot tonight. Okay. This is really unusual. We don't really have, I can't think of a mobile home park coming up, recently. So the county grants the applicant a special use permit, and that says, okay, you can put up 84 mobile homes on the site, but those are not, but it does not specify where they're going to be located.
That's correct. Sorry, that's correct. So I haven't looked at his special use permit in particular, but yes, that's generally how those are handled, because it's not a platted subdivision or anything like that.
Okay, because when we look, at least when I look at it, I just think, oh, well, those are
lots, right?
Those are lots, but they're not. Those are totally artificial. They're not grandfathered in any way. The mobile homes can be located wherever.
Right.
Okay.
Right. There's
just want
probably
to make sure I'm clear, because that's important.
There may be some additional rules governing mobile home parks, but you are correct that those are not platted lots.
Okay. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions for the staff?
I have a couple.
Yes, sir.
I see the pad there is gonna be for the parking. How are you gonna get to the parking? Are they gonna install a driveway?
There is a quasi gravel parking driveway there already. It'll be cleaned up, improved, made functional. There was one existing. It was never fully removed. It's just kind of assimilated back into the ground over the intervening 30-some-odd years.
This area served by a sewer, or is it?
Excellent question. The applicant did get approved by the county the ability to put in sewer line out here. That was also under a special use permit because the majority of the septic fields on this property were failing over time. So the entire property is served by public sewer.
As this piece will be.
As will this one, correct.
Any other questions for the staff? Okay, at this time, I'd like to open up the public hearing on CBE-18-100. Would the applicant like to come forward and address the board?
Chairman, Chairman and Board. Joe Franklin, Franklin Management, agent for my brother John Franklin. We propose to switch this lot due to the fact that the septic tanks were failing in the years. So this lot 17 that he was talking about on Hickory Court, actually the old owners allowed a double wide to go on this lot, and they pushed this house back to give them both big lots because it was not a usable lot. But now that we put the septic tanks out and the sewers all in, don't want to really ask Miss Bowman, she's been there for like 30 years in her double wide, to have to not renew her lease, make her move it out of there to obtain the lot and make it 2 single wides in there. Didn't feel like that's fair to her or anything. That's why I proposed to take the last lot on Clay, which has an existing driveway. That is not the right lot. That's in the woods past this lot. This lot actually has a fence around it still. Still has the double pad asphalt where the other road links right to it. It's been used before. It's another mobile home sitting right beside it. And we would just like to be able to obtain, since we did have the expense of putting all the sewer in, probably $1 million to get it all. We would like to get the 86 lots that we, we're supposed to have, and we would just ask permission to use that lot, obtaining to have to not renew somebody's lease to get the lots. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So, I'm confused. I'm not following this. So how much impervious area already exists here?
On which lot you're talking about?
On this lot?
The 25, the one I proposed to go to?
Before you make the change, I don't follow the numbers of how much additional impervious area.
The additional impervious area is only from the trailer itself. The gravel and the concrete pad were to be used, existing are to be used for parking. He's not proposing additional parking. He's only proposing the additional impervious cover from the roof of the mobile home park.
Oh, okay. And so all the concrete that's there, none of that's being pulled up.
Correct.
It's just going to stay there. You'll just clear it off, or
Actually, pretty clear. That's like I said, that picture don't hang to the lot.
Okay.
Question.
Okay. Any other questions for the
Just to be
applicant?
clear, the pictures that we have are not the lot in question.
It's actually got a chain link fence already around it and everything. It's a very clear lot with a driveway.
Is the grass mowed inside the chain link
Yes, sir.
fence? Okay.
I have another question. You're not, I understand there's a pad there, but why couldn't you put a pad in some of the open area in the center?
That's a playground area in the center, so I'd have to be able to tie my city sewer into it, so it has to be right there on the same path. See, I'm talking about 25 in the very back of the park. you have to meet y'all's code too, to be 15 foot off of both homes, and then have enough room to put a home in there with decks on it. That's the problem with I have on 17 Hickory Court, is the lot wasn't being used for so long. When they let someone put a home in there, they didn't even have the thought of city sewer coming in there in the future. So that sort of blocked me in to where I can't use that lot unless I put like a 12-foot wide home in there, which I've been putting brand new homes in there since we've got the sewer. I've only got one lot left, and that's the one I can't use. So that's why I'm proposing to put it back there and put a brand new 16 by 80 home in there to make it look nice.
Okay, there was another lot you said that, the lot up near the front where you said that the two trailers, they had encroached somehow onto that.
Yes, sir.
Let me ask you this. Does that have a parking area?
Yes, sir.
They've encroached into that. How about, is there any reason why you couldn't remove that parking area, that concrete pad, and turn that into a grassy area that would percolate?
That would be my intentions. We would actually submit a letter saying that that lot would never be a lot again, that the lot would be 25 clay, that would not exceed my number of lots that I'm allowed, and it would just be moving it to that spot. Close that, cut the driveway out, and put the grass and seed in there.
I'm having a little bit of problem with your case because, well, you haven't told us exactly what the mitigation is, and how you're going to mitigate this. And I'd like to see a concrete, boy, that's a bad pun, concrete proposal for maybe removing the pad and reducing the paved areas. But without seeing that plan, I personally, have a little bit of trouble approving this. That's my thought. I'm not sure how the other board members
I have
feel.
a question. The aerial photograph that they showed back some time ago when there was a mobile home on the site that you want to put a mobile home. It looked like there were several other mobile homes in the area, and they're not there anymore?
None of them are there.
Are the pads still there?
Well, that don't even look like a pad to me. I don't believe, if it is, it's all busted up. It's just like from the lot 25 on down is what you're seeing. All that's just, like he said, is all grow back up over the 30 years. But the lot in question that I want to use actually has a chain link fence still around it. The grass is cut, still got the pad in shape. It's got the parking pad there. And
Where the other homes were that you don't propose putting anything there now, it's just letting nature take over.
Yes, sir.
Now, is there 1,000 square foot of impervious area that can be removed?
It would just be the parking pad. That's the only thing that's in between that now. It's just a parking pad right there. I've just cut that out. We're planning on putting all brand new asphalt in there after we do the new water lines anyway.
Where there looked like there were 3 homes that are not going to come back in there. It looked like there were 3 mobile homes from the aerial view that aren't there now.
They've been gone before we ever bought the property.
But where those homes were, are there impervious areas where those homes were now? I'm somewhat agree with Mr. Gusman. I'd like to see the mitigation plan. I think that Mr. Wilson has an idea, has a thought of what I'm talking about. If there's impervious area that's down there that can be cleaned up and it would go back to nature, then that's good mitigation. So we're putting a home for a place where there was grass, and then we're going to take up impervious area and let grass go back. But we can't consider that unless you ask for it to be deferred until our next meeting, so you can discuss it with the county and come up with a concrete mitigation plan. Our only option, as I understand it, is to either grant it, deny it, or let you defer it. Is that right?
Yes.
So it's so
So I
I
could
think you
defer
might
it and
want
come
to
up with a
defer it
concrete-
until the next meeting.
Okay.
Would you be inclined to do that? So you're going to ask now for it to be deferred until our next meeting? Then, Mr. Wilson, I would suggest that somebody go ahead and take photographs of the right lot. And then if there's impervious area out there that can be restored, that would go a lot for me. I don't know about anybody else, but it'd go a long ways for me to approve it. The fellow has, he should have 84 homes, is that what you said? 84, 85, whatever the
It'd be
county
86
originally
lots
authorized.
total.
Back when I was a mere babe, then, that's fine with me. We just gotta figure some way to put it in.
I agree with, for what my vote is, I agree with John's analysis here. You can find enough concrete out there somewhere, I know, to take up enough to make up for what the trailer's gonna set. At least I'm of that opinion. I remember the history here. I remember when the tanks were failing, septic tanks were failing on these properties. And you can see by a couple of the pictures there why they failed. The land just doesn't perk. You've got the sewer line in there now. If the grass is already being mowed, you've already got a driveway, and the lot is fenced off, you can certainly ought to be able to find enough concrete out there to make it easy for us to just have a trade-off for the impervious cover. That would be my vote.
Yes, sir.
We have a motion to defer, all request to defer, so I guess we just defer.
We have to vote on that, don't we?
It's not a bad idea. I don't believe you have to, but yeah, that's generally what
Okay,
the
so
board has
we
been
leave the
doing.
public hearing open.
Right, correct.
Okay. And if, also like to add, besides a plan with the concrete, if you're going to do plantings, if you could, come in with the plan that specifies what you're going to plant and where, so we can take a look at that too. We know how many planting units, and I know that would, if you're removing a lot of concrete, that would, I'd feel a lot better about this project.
I'm looking at the photograph. I might suggest you may be able just to remove the road bed that served the additional trailers, and whatever Michael says, but that would be maybe my first choice, because it does serve no purpose now. Just take.
Mr. Franklin, can I ask a question? Can
Yes,
you
sir.
come look at this? Not the lot in question.
A lot different, don't it?
First.
I would like to say the lot 17, it don't have a pad in there for the mobile home to sit on it. It's already been removed years ago, so it is all grass on lot 17 right there. It's only the parking pad out front.
Okay.
Which I would
And
remove.
we're not having a meeting next month, was it?
It'd be August.
It would be August, so you'll have the August, to pull this together, and I'm sure the
That's
staff will
fine.
be there to help you work this out. Okay,
Thank you, sir.
okay, the public hearing is open. Would anyone else like to speak on this? Okay. It seems to me we voted it in the past to.
Yeah, that's generally what this board has done, so I'd recommend continuing with that
Well,
practice.
I'll make a motion to accept the applicant's request to defer the matter CBE 18-100 at 4131 Centerville Road. And it'll be deferred until our next meeting, which will be in August of 2018.
Okay.
Mr. Roadley,
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip,
Yes.
Mr. Gussman,
Yes,
Mr. Hughes,
Yes.
Mr. Apperson.
Yes.
thank you for coming out. We'll see you in August, and hopefully we'll see a nice plan we can approve. Okay, our next case is CBE-18-101 Busch Gardens, the Pet Shenanigans Building Deck. Okay.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long again, here to present CBE-18-101, Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. Ms. Susie Cheeley has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment LLC for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a new deck and HVAC unit on property located at 7851 Pocahontas Trail within the James River watershed. This property is also known as Busch Gardens Williamsburg and was platted in 1974 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance in 1990. Total impervious cover within the RPA is 170 square feet within the seaward 50-foot RPA. The existing conditions of the lot include an HVAC unit that is in need of being replaced and was originally installed in a small wooden deck. The slope falls off very suddenly and steeply from the building, making working on this unit very challenging and at times unsafe. In order to provide a safe and level working environment for the technicians serving this unit, the size of the deck is being proposed to increase to 170 square feet. Typical mitigation for this amount of impact is 3 shrubs. As the project site has a full tree canopy, no mitigation is required in the vicinity of the project site. However, mitigation requirements will be encompassed in the requirements for the Ireland expansion project, which will be presented later this evening. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a deck and HVAC system and finds the application meets the conditions in section 23-11 and 23-14, and that the application should be heard by the board because the proposed deck encroaches into the seaward 50-foot RPA and is accessory in nature. Staff has reviewed the application exception request and has determined impacts associated with the proposal to be minor for the proposed development. Staff recommends approval of this exception request with the following conditions incorporating the approval: that the applicant obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project, and that this exception request approval become null and void if construction has not begun by June 13th, 2019, with written requests for an extension submitted no later than 6 weeks prior to the date of expiration. Again, the applicant request is to construct a deck behind the Pet Shenanigans building to hold an HVAC unit and equipment. Vicinity is located on 7851 Pocahontas Trail, otherwise known as Busch Gardens, within the James River watershed. Aerial photograph is of the particular lot in question. The HVAC and deck are located in approximately this vicinity of the aerial photograph. As you can see, topography slopes off dramatically at the edge of this building and flows down into the perennial stream. Resource protection area encapsulates the entire scope of the project and extends northward. A site plan above indicates the proposed deck expansion outside of the current Pet Shenanigans structure. The red line above indicates the 100-foot RPA. This line being the stream and wetland system. Above, photographs show the current site of the proposed area. As you can see, a very steep slope here and very little canopy openings for mitigation. Here's the perennial stream. Here's the perennial stream that's in question at the bottom of this slope. Again, staff does recommend approval of this proposal, and given that all other necessary local, state, and federal permits are required, and that this exception become null and void if not started by June 13th, 2019, with written requests for an extension no later than 6 weeks prior to the expiration. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board may have at this time.
Was the impact 170 square feet? Was that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions for the staff? Okay. At this time, I'd like to open the public hearing. Would the applicant like to come forward and address the board?
Hello, board. How you doing? My name is Larry Giles. I'm here representing Busch Gardens. The deck, as staff correctly indicated, is really, we need to enlarge it for new HVAC equipment and the safety of just working on it. So that's really the entire reason we're here.
Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Thank you for coming out. Would anyone else like to speak on this issue? This time I'll close the public hearing. Any discussion from the board? Pretty minimal project. Okay, would somebody like to make a motion?
Make a motion to adopt the resolution to grant the exception for Ches Bay Board Case CBE-18-101, Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, Pet Shenanigans Building.
Okay, Ms. Parman, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. Gussman?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries and the exception is granted. Okay, our next case, also Busch Gardens, CBE-18-094. Mr. Wilson.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Mike Wilson here to present case CBE-18-094, SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment, Busch Gardens, Williamsburg, the Ireland expansion. Mr. Piotr Svitkowski has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a new attraction on property located at 7851 Pocahontas Trail within the James River watershed. Property is further identified as James City County Tax Map Number 51401000009 and also known as Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. Parcel was platted in 1974 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Ordinance. The proposed installation of the attraction results in 3,700 square feet of encroachment into the landward 50-foot RPA and 12,900 square feet of encroachment into the seaward 50-foot RPA, equating to a total impact of 16,600 square feet of RPA encroachment. The proposed attraction will also add, within that 16,600 square feet, the attraction will add 6,000 square feet of impervious cover to the RPA. To date, the applicant has proposed a mitigation plan of 15 planting units. Required mitigation for this amount of impact would be 15 planting units. Therefore, the proposal does meet county requirements. Staff's evaluated the application and the exception request for the construction of a new attraction and does find that the application meets the conditions as laid out in the ordinance and that the application should be heard before this board because the proposed additions encroach into the seaward 50-foot RPA. A water quality impact assessment was submitted per the ordinance requirements for the proposed project within the RPA. Staff's reviewed the application and the exception request and has determined that the impacts associated with this proposal are major for the development. Staff does recommend approval of this exception request with the following conditions incorporated into that approval. That the applicant obtain any other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project. That a surety of $8,000 be required in a form acceptable to the county attorney's office to guarantee the mitigation. That this exception request approval shall become null and void should construction not begin by June 13, 2019. And that written request for extension to the exception request shall be submitted to Stormwater Resource Protection Division no later than 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. If I may direct your attention to your monitors, the applicant request again is to construct a new attraction within the Ireland Hamlet section of Busch Gardens, Williamsburg. Aerial photograph of the site. The proposed attraction is in this area. As you come in to the park, for those unfamiliar with it, you come in through the English or England section, come up a hill. The Clydesdale paddock area is here. Come down this walk across a bridge into the Ireland section. The proposed attraction is right here, immediately to the left of the bridge as you come across. Also evident in this aerial photograph is the clearing that is allowed to happen for the Colonial Pipeline and their easement that does run through Busch Gardens. Topography of the site. This bridge does cross that ravine that does have a water feature in it. There is a waterfall type rock structure here that dams up part of the river or the creek system. And then the water flows through this way and then down past a couple other rides and down into the Rhine River, which is the major stormwater BMP for this park. The attraction will sit up here on this knoll, and part of the equipment for the attraction will be located over here. We'll see that here in a few minutes. The utility easement, the Colonial Pipeline easement that I talked about, is in this location. And the RPA as it affects this portion of the park, outlined there. From the site plan application, impacts to the RPA, the purple and orange would be permanent impacts to the RPA. Those would be the impervious cover, and then there's a couple pads located over here for some of the equipment that is needed to run the attraction. The bluish green area would be temporary impacts necessary for construction. Site photographs, we are standing beneath the bridge that crosses over from the Clydesdale paddock into the Ireland section. The attraction would be over here to the left. A little further down, the attraction it would be located in this area. This is the Colonial Pipeline easement that had mentioned several times. The attraction will be off to the right, and over to the left you can see through the vegetation here, that is a service road that Busch Gardens does use to get to the various attractions for maintenance and emergency access when necessary. And then another view of the attraction would be right in front of us. The bridge is over here to the right, Colonial Pipeline, and you can see one of the Colonial Pipeline markers right here in front. And then looking from the top of the service road, the attraction would be up over here in the center left of the photograph. The Colonial Pipeline easement does run down here, to the left of the service road. Permit conditions, should the board grant the exception, any other necessary local, federal, state permits, an $8,000 surety, guaranteed of mitigation, null and void if not started by June 13, 2019, and that extension request for be submitted to our office no later than 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. Be happy to answer any questions the board may have regarding this application.
Could you go back to the first aerial photograph?
This one?
Yeah. So, what's the water body that the bridge is over? What do you call that?
It is part of the Rhine River system. It's in the headwaters of the Rhine River.
Is that dammed up?
It is dammed up, and it was dammed up long before Chesapeake Bay was enacted. I don't want to give too many other details other than that. Maybe Mr. Giles does know when that was dammed up.
I'm just curious. What I want to know is, how is the drainage? Can you show me how the water's draining from the project location?
Certainly. The attraction's located here. There's going to be some of the runoff would come down here to this ravine, which does cut across, and then follows parallel to the service road down and connects with this drainage here. This drainage comes down from here. This part of the park does drain the majority of the parking lots and the entrance for the Busch Gardens. If we go, and I have the wrong photograph here, but the project location's over here. I have it in the wrong location, but what we're talking about is this finger of the Rhine River.
Okay.
Okay,
so it all ends up in the Rhine River.
It will all end up in the
which
Rhine
we
River.
recognize as a giant BMP.
That is
right?
correct.
So everything, I think, from the last Busch Gardens case, we had this discussion. Everything drains into the Rhine River, which is going to trap any sediments. Nothing's going to get out to the James.
That's correct.
It'd be a heck of a storm.
Major catastrophe. That is correct. The Rhine River would end up as the ultimate sediment sink.
Okay, so I mean, there is a possibility the Rhine River might have to be dredged at some time.
At some point in the future, yes.
Okay.
What we didn't outline for the board was the proposed erosion sediment control plan for this project. It will have to meet all the state and county requirements for erosion sediment control. It will need to get potentially some wetland permits for any wetland or stream impacts that they may be proposing. That I'm a little hesitant to say that whether for sure they need those or not, because that plan has not been submitted to our office yet.
Okay, and what's the mitigation?
15 planting units to replant those areas of the temporary construction impacts.
That's according to the formula. It's only 15 planting units for 6,000.
Yes.
6,000?
6,000 square feet of impervious cover equates to 15 planting units. That would be 15 canopy trees, 30 understory, and 45 shrubs. And then we would allow Busch Gardens to, just like we would any applicant, to swap some of those units for either, if they wanted more trees or more shrubs, we would allow substitutions.
Sure, okay.
But yeah, that part of the mitigation plan is very formulaic.
Those are my questions.
I remember when this was built, and it's essentially, it's a man-made lake. It's a
Yes,
sediment pond.
indeed
The way-
it is.
I mean, simple language, I would call it just a glorified sediment pond, is all it is. And I have no problem at all with what Busch Garden does to their, with their drainage area. They're going to be the ones that's going to have to clean it out eventually, if it's needed. Nothing's going back into the public waterway.
I have a question. Where are they going to do the mitigation plantings? They're not going to do them on this site. Not going to be any place left to plant them. They're already going to cut down all the trees that are there.
Piotr may correct me if I'm wrong, but these areas that need to be denuded for the construction would be replanted.
So they're going to cut the trees down, and then they get credit for putting new trees there.
As opposed to conversion to grass or something else. Yes, sir.
Where's the mitigation coming from? If it's already there, and how are they going to mitigate it? Yeah, because that's not part of the 6,000 square feet, is it?
No, the 6,000 square feet is up here.
Natural structure.
Is the actual structure, concrete, decking, rooftop.
I might be a little slow to understand it, but we've got an area that's forested or something. They're going to cut all the forest down, and then we're going to let them plant new forest there, and we're going to say that's going to be mitigation. But in addition, they get the area where they put the impervious structure. So we haven't gotten any mitigation. Does that make any sense?
I understand the question, and I'll defer the answer to the applicant.
Mr. Wilson, in this image, the I guess, eastward edge of the facility, whatever that's going to be.
Mhm.
Is that actually encroaching into the stream or the wetlands adjacent to the stream, or?
In this area here,
Yes.
it is not intended to. That's my understanding.
I'm assuming you've explored other options. I know this site is constrained by RPA, but in the planning process?
I would let the applicant explain their planning and thought processes on the location.
Thank you.
We ready to open the public hearing? Okay, at this time, I'd like to open the public hearing on CBE-18-094. Okay, you've heard some of our concerns. Let's hear some answers.
Chairman, members of the board, thank you very much for hearing our case. Thank you, staff, for all the work you did and working with us out. When we pick locations for rides, we don't arbitrarily pick them. We pick them a lot about how the park works mechanically. What areas of the park have services, what area of the park we already have attractions. Ireland was picked for those very reasons. The existing services we have there, from bathrooms to restaurants to what else is in that area, is why that area picks. It works within our park as a mechanics so that we separate crowd flow and then everybody has a great time. So that is one of the areas why we picked Ireland. Now, when you look at Ireland from beyond that standpoint, you go, wow, where do you build? You know, we have a lot of buildings there where, I mean, almost half of Ireland's in the RPA existing, all the existing buildings. So this was one location we felt that we could satisfy, hopefully you folks, and also the way the park operates, and delivering something that we think will work. So those are some of the issues. I want to also point out, I think you were asking about where everything drains. It does all drain to the Rhine River. My engineers behind me here tell me it's 22 times as large as it needs to be. As far as maintenance, we have actually maintained that Rhine River. We've had some siltation that's built up over the years. In fact, in 2013, we actually cleared all that out and restored it to where it is today. We've been the most beautiful theme park for 28 years in a row. Part of it is the terrain. They built this park back in 1974 when they first started development, and they picked it before not only the issues that we have here, but ADA issues and a whole bunch of other issues. But that's what makes our park really unique, something that you can't even see anymore today. This would never exist in today's. But on the flip side, that causes us a lot of issues where we build things. You know, this is one site. We can look at 4 other sites and we'll have very similar conditions because of just the terrain that we exist in. So those are my comments. If you have any other questions, I'd be glad to work on answering them.
Yeah, I got my question again.
Okay.
Your 15 units is 15 canopy trees and then 1-story trees and all, but you're going to cut down that many trees in order to have a place to put your mitigation. Do you see where I'm coming from? I don't understand. I don't see the mitigation.
You're looking at sky hitting the ground kind of thing, and where would we find a place to plant those trees?
Yes.
A lot of times what we've done, we planted them on the perimeters in areas that are open, in areas around parking lots. We've done mitigation in those places in the past, and normally we work with staff to locate those locations, and with their concurrence, we typically find an agreement. I think typically as far as planning goes, I think as much planning as we do out there, we typically exceed the numbers without even doing anything. So that's a very normal thing we just do as a part of our business.
So I want to make sure I'm clear on this. So you've got a mitigation requirement of 15 trees.
Yes.
It's not just going to be, you're not just going to replant on this site. You'll plant where it does make a difference. It will intercept and be an overall improvement for the runoff.
Exactly.
Okay, and that hasn't been developed yet, and that will be submitted, and the staff will be able to review that and make their call whether it's appropriate or not. It's not just going to be, it can't just be on this site where they've cleared the trees. It's got to be a net, it's got to be in addition to what's replanted there.
Staff understands.
Okay.
I have, if I can go somewhat out of order, can I ask staff a question? In this area where they're going to clear to do the work, would they have to get a permit to cut the trees down just if I had this on my property and I wanted to cut the trees down and it's in the RPA, would I have to get a permit?
Yes, sir.
He's gonna have to, that should be considered for the mitigation. If you have to get a permit to cut these trees down, but those aren't considered in your, how many square feet, 16,000 square feet. Is this area considered as part of the area that's being disturbed when you did your planning units? Or are you just talking about the actual physical structure that's the impervious
The
area?
planting units are based on impervious cover, not disturbed area.
So if this was in my backyard and I wanted to cut the trees down, I have to get a permit, and you'd have to show mitigation for that.
You'd still need to get a permit, and
Probably require mitigation, but you're not requiring any mitigation for them to cut these trees down.
it is site-specific. The requirements you're talking about, just for land disturbing permit purposes, we would not require mitigation just to remove trees. It does require a permit and a plan of development. You just can't go out and clear your trees with without a plan of development in place. In this particular case, these 16,600 square feet of proposed disturbance within the RPA would fall under land disturbing permit. The 6,000 square feet of RPA impacts is what we are concerned with from the Chesapeake Bay Board's perspective. We've never taken the entire disturbed area in the RPA and mitigated that. It's only been the impervious cover, whether it's a major commercial project such as this, or an individual home such as the one we heard tonight with the patio. Certainly the disturbed area for that patio was more than 64 square feet within that RPA, but we only mitigate for the impervious cover that's added to the RPA. If it is the board's decision that the 15 planting units is not adequate in this particular case, we can come up with further mitigation agreement with Busch Gardens to present that at the next board hearing.
I don't have any problem with the structure, with the application. My concern is with the mitigation. Things happen, Busch Gardens, I'll leave you alone there, Mr. Wilson. Now, I don't have any problem with the structure. My concern is are the 15 planning units sufficient to cover the loss result of doing the construction work? I don't see how you can cut a tree down and put another tree there and get credit for planting a tree. So that's my thought.
Well, the area that's cleared, the work area, not the permanent impacts, how will that be replanted? What will that be replanted with?
I would defer that to Mr. Giles or his engineer. That plan has not been presented yet.
Normally, we would during the site plan process, we normally submit what our planning schedule will be and locate it appropriately. Am I correct with that?
Yes. So my name is Peter Świętochowski. I'm with VHB. Typically, with any site plan requirements, as well as this one, when we get to the design and site plan development, there are a certain landscape sheet which will be included, which will show not only the landscape requirements per the zoning for the buildings and everything else, but they always show the actual mitigation requirements and mitigation areas which will be mitigated with this project. Just something to point out, and Mike, you can correct me if I'm wrong, I believe there is several credits left from the previous mitigation that was done with the Verbolten, one of the previous rights. We pretty much over-mitigated in big extent on one of those rights, and we never claimed this credit in sense of bringing that in and trying to say we planted more than we need. The Busch Gardens always comes back and plants more planting for any particular project that they typically do. With this particular project and the mitigation credits, I think something to point out in this application is those requirements are not coming from the staff, or it's not coming from us. Those requirements are coming from the zoning, actual zoning for the property from the county. So that that mitigation requirements are driven by the zoning requirements itself. It's not like we were deciding how many plants we're going to put per that impact. The impacts are calculated based on the table from the actual zoning. That's not only the mitigation which is proposed for this project. I think something which needs to be mentioned as well, which is part of the mitigation. The entire permanent area on this mitigation plan, which we can't really speak of what that is, but we'll receive also a stone cover underneath to protect any kind of a provision from erosion under that particular permanent structure. Again, we can't disclose yet what kind of structure are we talking about, but you both probably understand where typically the stone is required for what kind of structure. So there is additional 6,000 square feet of mitigation under this particular permanent cover, which will be done also with the stone underneath. So that's part of the plan and part of the application in the same way. So the 15, I understand your question with the 15 mitigation credits, and the mitigation credit itself are calculated based on the square footage of the impervious area. And from the zoning code, it's a 1 credit per 400 square feet. That's where the 15 credits comes out. So realistically, we're talking about the 15 new large trees, 30 understory trees, 45 shrubs. From that area which we currently have, that will be much greater amount of the tree cover that we're replanting from what actually is in this area particularly right now. There's some of the pictures which were shown over there. You can see there are some full mature trees, but it's definitely a smaller number that we're proposing with the replanting.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant?
Also, the trees that you plant, I like the idea of mitigating some off-site. You can pick out sites where the trees can have a long, natural, healthy life. And, you know, even suggest to anything to Busch Gardens how to plant a tree. I mean, Busch Gardens in Colonial Williamsburg, you know, all you have to do is ride through either park, and you can see the excellence that's there. I'm sure you pick out plots to put your plants so that they grow healthy and don't cost you any money.
Something to mention with that mitigation requirement and planting itself as well. All of those plants are always put in back into the RPA. So we typically look on the property for the areas which are already denuded and they don't have some good RPA cover, and that's where the typical credits are applied if they cannot be applied in the area due more from the safety reasons of the particular distance that needs to be held for that.
And put them on the pipeline.
Yes,
Okay.
as well.
All right. Thank you very much. Would anyone else like to speak on this issue? At this time, I'll close the public hearing. And any discussion from the board? As we've mentioned, this is probably the largest BMP in the county. So regardless what they do here, I don't think there's going to be any impacts out to the James.
Mr. Chairman, I don't disagree with the dialogue that's been had. And I appreciate that the BMP is many times oversized for the drainage area that's coming to it. We also have a resource within the park that is an aquatic resource. And I'm not impinging Busch Gardens because I think they are good stewards. It's just paying attention to how water drains from the site to make sure we don't create prolonged erosion off the site, even though it's being captured in a BMP downstream. And I know they're good stewards of their land, so I'm not questioning that. It's just an observation based upon the proximity of this development to the aquatic resource.
Well, I've got my concerns as far as the size of the mitigation. By code is allowed, the mitigation is what's required by code, so as such, I'll vote for it. Mitigation should be more than what's being required by the county or offered by the applicant.
Mike, I have a question for you.
Certainly.
The mitigation credits that the applicant was referring to, are you aware of those? And are those banked with the county, or how's that work?
That was Yes, but I'm aware of it. It was for the Verbolten attraction. They over mitigated what was required at that time. Those plants are in the ground, healthy, thriving. We did not, quote unquote, dip into that for this project to make up for any of the mitigation requirements for this project, but they certainly could. I'm unaware off the top of my head how many credits there were there. But I want to say it was double-digit number of planting units.
Okay. This issue really, I can't remember this issue coming up before about credits, for Chesapeake Bay Board cases of us, granting credits. In the past, if you ever mitigated, we said, okay, that went into our considerations. If they presented a mitigation plan that was more than required by the ordinance, we said fine, and we used that to make our decision for the project. But there was nothing ever expressed that, oh, we'll let you carry those additional credits over for another project. So we need to be really clear on this. If we're going to allow this, we've never adopted a policy on that, and I don't remember that coming up before. So if I'm not saying I'm opposed to it and it shouldn't happen, but I think before we go down that road, we need to we may have to have another work session and talk about that and have an official policy for the board about about how we're letting people bank things. What's to prevent Mr. Roth from coming back next month saying, hey, that project you approved last month, we did twice as many plantings. I want to carry that over to another project. Or, well, that's an extreme. But if we're going to allow banking of credits, we need to, be really clear what the rules are on that.
Understood.
Okay, having made those remarks, I don't have any problems with this project. I can improve of it. Your discussion?
I can remember back years ago when that project was built. As a matter of fact, our company helped to clear for the Busch Gardens and stuff. And that operation, the people, the powers that be, and the trees and the locations and stuff that were disturbed, they were very cautious that it was done in a manner that it didn't affect later development in there. I think at Busch Gardens, thinking back and looking at it from the time when it started to now, has done a real good job trying to maintain the credibility and the quality, and they do whatever is necessary to make it work and to satisfy James City County, and they are a plus to James City County as far as I'm concerned. And so I say you have to give them a little bit of leeway on this, because I don't think that they're out there just trying to cut everything down. I think they're doing the things that they need to do to survive and to make it right and make it workable. And I can see their point on this, and I think I can support them on that. And as far as these credits and stuff, yes, I do think that it's necessary to share in it like everybody else does, coming up to that common denominator that we'll figure that out, and that's what we can do, I think.
Any other discussion? Would someone like to make a motion?
See, I'd like to make a motion that we accept we adopt the resolution to grant the exception for the Chesapeake Bay Board, case number CBE 18-094 Busch Gardens.
Okay, Ms. Parman, will you call the roll, please?
Mr. Rodley?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. Gussman?
Yes.
Mr. Hughes?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Okay,
Excuse me,
motion
yes.
carries and the exception is granted. Good luck with your project, and you don't need permission from the European Union to expand Ireland, just about everybody else.
22 times bigger than it needs to be. I believe that.
Okay, that concludes our public hearings for tonight. On to board considerations. Mr. Wilson?
I have to apologize. I forgot to bring the memo with me. I have to read it off my phone. At the April 11, 2018 work session held by the Chesapeake Bay Board, it was requested that staff compile a list of conditions for the board to review and approve, for the board to review and for staff to include in as written recommendations. These conditions were to be used or are to be used when applicable on those cases that are seeking an exception from the board. And then there's a list of standard conditions that the staff put together from board cases that have appeared in the last year to 18 months before this board. I'd be happy to go through that entire list if you'd like, Mr. Chair. Most of them are non-controversial, such as allowing for the obtaining the other necessary local, federal, state permits is necessary for the project. The one that did come up and generated some discussion at the work session and that I believe we should discuss a little further tonight would be the requirement of an affidavit for those projects coming before the board for impacts. Let me find it in my list. I will read it into the record. Thank you. The applicant must execute an affidavit at the Williamsburg, James City County Courthouse and provide evidence of such to the county. What is included in that is a copy of the mitigation plan, a copy of the resolution, and then the affidavit itself. The cost to the applicant is $25 to record that. And then I'll answer any other questions the board may have regarding this list or other conditions that the board may wish to include in any future staff report recommendations, or whether even staff report recommendations are necessary. If the board feels that they're not necessary, please let us know, and if that you request those recommendations and guidance from staff, that you let us know in the affirmative as well.
Quick question for Ms. Parman. Do we need to actually read this into the record, or that we're, this list? Does he need to read the whole list for it to become part of the official record of the meeting?
No, is it included in the agenda, right? So you can see it.
It is. Okay. So, and we're all clear that these items A through I are the staff recommendations. Personally, I think the staff recommendations are very important. Meetings would last a lot longer if the board had to come up with the recommendations for each one of the cases. So I think it's of immense help, and I would expect you to consider, continue with making the staff recommendations. Any other thoughts on that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, the recommendations all fall back to points of law, not your particular preference one way or the other. Everything you say is backed up by state and county code. Absolutely necessary.
Yeah,
I vote anyway, yeah.
So I think it's the sense of the board. It's important you continue to make the staff recommendations. And if, we want to see any changes in them, we can certainly have another working meeting that's open to the public, consider comments and, and make changes. But the list looks excellent to me.
To go back to the meeting and the discussion of the affidavit, as we discussed in the meeting, the thought was to apply it for consistency to all applications. And I think that was the point was made, and that was brought before us and now brought before the public in an open meeting to make everyone aware of that. So are we consistent in that understanding?
That's the way it was.
Yep. That'll be part of our staff recommendations. And again, they are recommendations. We're not, we consider each case on its individual merits. If we need to make changes, we can.
And certainly this board has deleted recommendations from a resolution and modified recommendations on an as-needed basis.
Okay. Thank you for preparing this. All right. We have no matters of special privilege tonight. Can we have a motion to adjourn? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
You got a question? Aye. Or missed it there, Billy. Billy had a question.
You have to be quick.
I know. And as you get older, you get slower, but you don't get any less thoughtful. I saw in the paper the other day where Ches Bay passed 100,000 acres of new underwater. I would like to ask the board, maybe to ask Mike if he could find out from VIMS without a lot of work and everything goes with it, what did the scientists there attribute the success of the program to? It doesn't have to be anything, 1 or 2 paragraphs, like what's working and what's not working. I would like to think that some of the things that we do help it work. But I would just like to have just a couple comments on how they feel, the gut feelings they have on what's getting better. Why is it getting better? That's all I'm bringing up.
Okay.
I can tell you some of it is related to that person sitting over there who is doing her best to restore stream channel within the county.
I agree. Jim Perry has left now, so I've lost my contact over there.
Well, he's around.
Yeah, but
He's
still, you don't want to
he
bother
lives in the
him.
county.
I know. He's always kayak. You can't catch him when you need him, but it's, I'm just curious as to what a gut feeling they have about, and what's going to happen, what's on the horizon. Are we winning, or is it just a temporary skirmish, or, exactly what are we doing right, and what could we be doing better? That's all, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. If we could talk about that a little bit, and I'm sure other board members probably have their thoughts on it too. Okay, all right, we're adjourned.